New HOA. Chairman slashes my job pay, calling me incompetent. Now he's begging for my help. I never thought I'd be writing this story, but here I am. After 15 years of managing the maintenance and operations of Pine Grove Estates, our residential community of 250 homes, I found myself in the middle of what I can only describe as a revenge served ice cold. It all started when Gerald Wilson, a retired corporate executive who'd moved into our community just 2 years ago, decided to run for HOA chairman. The previous chairman, Martha Williams, had been fantastic to work with. She understood the complexities of managing a large residential community and valued my experience. But Gerald, well, he was different from day one. I still remember our first official meeting after he won the election. He strutted into my office wearing his signature navy blazer with gold buttons, looking down his nose at my workspace through his wire-rimmed glasses. "Johnson," he said, not even bothering with my first name, Tom. "I've been reviewing the HOA's expenses, and frankly, I'm concerned about your compensation package." I sat up straighter in my chair. "What seems to be the problem, Mr. Wilson?" "The problem," he said, pulling out a stack of papers from his leather briefcase, "is that you're grossly overpaid for someone without any formal property management certifications. $75,000 a year, plus benefits for what essentially amounts to coordinating landscapers and handling maintenance requests. It's excessive." My blood started to boil, but I kept my cool. "Mr. Wilson, I've been managing this community for 15 years. I know every inch of our infrastructure, every vendor relationship, and every resident's needs. The previous board set my compensation based on market rates and—" He cut me off with a wave of his hand. "The previous board was clearly mismanaged. Times are changing, Johnson. We need to run this place like a proper business. I'm implementing a 30% pay cut effective next month. You'll be making $52,500 annually, which is more than generous given your qualifications." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "That's not legal. My contract clearly states." "Your contract has a clause allowing for compensation adjustments with board approval," he interrupted again. "I've already discussed this with the other board members. They agree with my assessment." What he didn't mention was that he'd stacked the board with his golfing buddies during the election. I later learned he'd convinced them I was incompetent and overpaid during their weekly rounds at the country club. "If you're unhappy with the new arrangement," he added with a smirk, "you're welcome to seek employment elsewhere." I had a mortgage to pay and a daughter in college. He knew I couldn't just walk away. So I swallowed my pride and accepted the pay cut, but I started looking for other jobs immediately. Unfortunately, the property management market was tight, and comparable positions were scarce. For the next 6 months, Gerald made my life hell. He questioned every decision I made, rejected routine maintenance requests as unnecessary expenses, and constantly reminded me how lucky I was to still have my job. He even started copying me on emails to property management recruiting firms, just to let me know I was replaceable. But then something beautiful happened. Something that proved karma is real. It started with a series of complaints about water damage in the newer section of our community. Several homeowners reported water stains on their ceilings and walls. I immediately recognized the pattern. It matched issues we'd had years ago with improperly installed flashing around chimneys. I drafted a detailed report recommending immediate inspection and repairs, estimating the cost at around $50,000 for all affected units. Gerald rejected it outright. "This is exactly the kind of fear-mongering waste I'm talking about," he declared during a board meeting. "A little water stain doesn't require a $50,000 solution. Have maintenance touch up the paint and we'll see if it happens again." I tried to explain that water damage doesn't just go away, that it would get worse and potentially lead to mold and structural issues. He wouldn't hear it. "I've managed multi-million-dollar corporate budgets," he boasted. "I think I know a thing or two about cost-effective solutions." 3 months later, during an unusually heavy rainstorm, all hell broke loose. 10 households reported severe leaks, with water literally pouring through their ceilings. The fire department had to be called to one unit where water had seeped into the electrical system, causing sparks and smoke. The next morning, my phone started ringing at 6 a.m. It was Gerald, and he sounded panicked. "Johnson, we have a situation. The residents are threatening to sue the HOA. They're saying we knew about the water issues and failed to address them. They have copies of your report. How did they get those?" I smiled to myself. I hadn't done anything wrong. Homeowners have the right to request maintenance records, and several had done so after the flooding. I'd simply provided them with copies of all relevant documentation, including my rejected repair recommendation. "Well, Mr. Wilson," I said calmly, "as I explained in my report 3 months ago, this was a predictable outcome of deferred maintenance on the chimneys. The water damage has likely caused significant structural issues now, not to mention potential mold growth. The repair costs will be substantially higher than my original estimate." There was a long pause on the line. How much are we talking about?" "Based on the extent of the damage, probably around $300,000, not including any legal fees if the homeowners decide to sue, which, given that we have documented evidence of the HOA choosing to ignore the problem, they probably will." I heard him take a shaky breath. "Listen, Johnson, Tom, I may have been hasty in my previous assessments. You clearly understand this property better than I gave you credit for. I need your help to fix this situation. I'm sure you can handle it, Mr. Wilson. After all, you have experience managing multi-million-dollar corporate budgets." "Please," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "The other board members are talking about removing me as chairman. They're saying this is gross negligence. I need someone who knows how to handle this, who has relationships with contractors and understands the repair process. I'll restore your original salary, plus a 10% raise." I let the silence stretch for a moment. "That's an interesting offer, Mr. Wilson, but I'm afraid my consultation fees for crisis management are quite a bit higher than that. You see, I've been doing some research on property management certifications, like you suggested. I've actually completed several courses over the past few months." "What? What are you asking for?" "My original salary restored, plus a 30% raise, the same percentage you cut. A new 3-year contract with guaranteed annual cost of living increases. Full autonomy over maintenance decisions under $100,000. And you'll need to make a public apology at the next board meeting for ignoring the maintenance recommendations that led to this crisis." "That's extortion," he sputtered. "No, Mr. Wilson, that's business. Times are changing, remember? We need to run this place properly. Of course you're welcome to find someone else to handle this situation. I'm sure there are plenty of qualified candidates who'd be happy to step into a crisis involving multiple lawsuits and angry homeowners." The next board meeting was a thing of beauty. Gerald, looking like he'd aged 10 years in a week, stood up and read a prepared statement about his regrettable decision to ignore expert maintenance recommendations and his full confidence in our property manager's judgment. He announced my new contract terms as part of the HOA's commitment to retaining experienced professionals. The repairs took 3 months to complete. I brought in contractors I'd worked with before, negotiated fair prices, and managed the project efficiently. The total came in around $275,000, still a massive hit to the HOA's reserves, but not quite as bad as it could have been. Most homeowners decided not to sue once they saw we were taking decisive action to fix the problems. Gerald still chairs the board, but he's a changed man. He doesn't question my decisions anymore. In fact, he barely speaks during maintenance discussions, just nods along with whatever I recommend. His golfing buddies on the board have started skipping meetings, sending their proxies instead. Last week, I overheard him talking to a new resident who was complaining about the monthly HOA fees. "I understand your concern," Gerald said, "but proper maintenance isn't cheap. We learned that lesson the hard way. Trust me, it's better to pay a little more up front than deal with the consequences of cutting corners. We're fortunate to have such an experienced property manager looking after things." I couldn't help but smile. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about proving your worth so undeniably that your critics become your strongest advocates. Plus, that 30% raise helped my daughter finish college without taking out additional loans, so I'd call it a win-win. These days, when new board members join, Gerald is the first to explain why my excessive salary is actually a bargain for the community. He even sponsored me for an advanced property management certification program. I think he finally understands that experience and expertise are worth paying for, especially when the alternative is hundreds of thousands in repairs and angry residents with lawyers on speed dial. The whole experience taught me something important. Sometimes you have to let arrogant people fail spectacularly before they can learn humility. And when they do fail, being professional and competent, rather than vindictive, can be the sweetest revenge of all. As for me, I'm still here, doing what I've always done, taking care of Pine Grove Estates and its residents. Only now I do it with better pay, more authority, and the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes karma needs a little help to work its magic. The best part? Last month, Gerald's wife Linda joined the social committee, and she loves telling new residents about how her husband really learned his lesson about respecting professional expertise. Apparently, she gives him grief about it regularly at home. She even invited me and my family over for dinner recently, saying she wanted to apologize for her husband's regrettable lapse in judgment. I accepted the invitation. The dinner was actually quite pleasant, especially when Gerald's teenage son asked him, "Hey Dad, isn't this the guy you said was overpaid before you messed up and flooded everybody's houses?" The look on Gerald's face was priceless. Sometimes revenge really does taste best when served at a family dinner. Update. It's been 6 months since the water damage incident, and I thought you might be interested in how things have developed at Pine Grove Estates. The changes have been pretty remarkable, and not just in terms of my position. Remember those property management certifications I mentioned? Well, I completed 3 more advanced courses, and the HOA didn't just pay for them, they were Gerald's idea. He actually approached me about it during a budget planning meeting. "Johnson Tom," he said, still struggling sometimes to use my first name, "I've been researching industry standards for community management. There's a new certification program focusing on preventive maintenance and risk management. I think it would be valuable for the community if you pursued it. The HOA will cover all expenses, of course." I couldn't help but ask, "Are you sure I'm qualified for that, Mr. Wilson?" He had the grace to look embarrassed. "I deserve that. Consider it part of my ongoing penance." The real victory, though, came during our annual HOA meeting last month. We had record attendance because Gerald had announced he would be addressing the state of the community's management. Some residents probably came expecting drama, but they got something else entirely. Gerald stood at the podium and delivered what I can only describe as a master class in how to admit you were wrong. "When I took this position," he began, "I thought running an HOA was like running any other business, just focus on the bottom line. I made decisions based purely on numbers, ignoring the expertise of our staff and the complex needs of our community. That approach cost us nearly $300,000 in emergency repairs, and it could have been much worse." He then outlined a new 5-year maintenance plan we developed together, including regular inspections, preventive repairs, and a healthy emergency fund. The best part? When some residents complained about a 5% increase in HOA fees to support the plan, Gerald shut them down himself. "I understand nobody likes paying more," he said firmly, "but I once tried to save us money by cutting corners. Ask anyone who had water pouring through their ceiling how that worked out. Quality property management and maintenance isn't cheap, but it's far less expensive than the alternative." The changes haven't just been about maintenance either. Remember those golfing buddies of his on the board? 3 of them resigned after the water damage incident, and we held special elections to replace them. The new board members are much more diverse. We now have a civil engineer, a retired contractor, and a real estate attorney. Every maintenance decision gets proper consideration now. But the most satisfying development came last week. A property management company that oversees several luxury communities in our area approached me with a job offer. They'd heard about how I handled the water damage crisis and were impressed. The salary they offered was significant, about 20% more than what I'm making now. I mentioned it to Gerald during our weekly meeting, mainly out of professional courtesy. His reaction surprised me. "We can't lose you," he said immediately. "What will it take to keep you here?" "Name your terms." I smiled. "Actually, Mr. Wilson, I've already declined their offer. Pine Grove Estates is my home. I've invested 15 years here, and I'd like to invest 15 more. But I appreciate knowing my options." The look of relief on his face was genuine. "You're a better person than I was," he admitted. "If our positions had been reversed during that pay cut incident—" "Water under the bridge," I said. "Or rather, not under the bridge anymore since we fixed all those leaks." He actually laughed at that. Coming from Gerald Wilson, that's practically a miracle. The whole experience has transformed our community. We're now being held up as an example of proper property management by the regional HOA association. They've even asked me to speak at their annual conference about crisis management and the importance of preventive maintenance. Gerald insisted on introducing me at the conference. His introduction included this gem. "Sometimes the most expensive thing you can do is try to save money by undervaluing expertise." I learned that lesson the hard way, but thanks to Tom's professionalism, our community is stronger for it. My daughter, who graduated college during all this drama, loves telling this story at family gatherings. She says it's better than any business school case study about leadership and accountability. She's probably right. As for me, I'm still here, doing what I love, taking care of Pine Grove Estates and its residents. Only now I do it with the full support of the board, proper resources, and the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about making positive changes that benefit everyone. Even Gerald's wife Linda has become one of my biggest supporters. She chairs the social committee now and recently organized a community champions dinner to recognize long-term staff members. When she presented my award, she couldn't resist adding, "Some people take longer to recognize value than others, don't they, dear?" The look she gave Gerald had the whole room chuckling. The lesson in all this? Sometimes standing your ground professionally and letting people face the consequences of their poor decisions is more effective than any revenge you could plan. Gerald learned his lesson. The community is better managed, and I get to do my job with the respect and resources I always deserved. And those water stains? They're just a fading memory, much like Gerald's days of questioning my expertise. Sometimes the best victories are the ones that make everyone's lives better, even the people who once tried to diminish you. Final update, 1 year later. A lot can change in a year, and the developments at Pine Grove Estates keep proving that karma works in interesting ways. I'm writing this final update because what happened last week put the perfect cap on this whole story. Remember those residents who were affected by the water damage? Well, despite our quick response to fix everything, 3 homeowners still decided to sue the HOA for negligence. They wanted compensation for damaged furniture, temporary housing costs, and what they called emotional distress. Their lawyer thought they had a solid case given the documented evidence that the board had ignored the maintenance recommendations. Here's where it gets interesting. The HOA's insurance company initially refused to cover the full claim, saying the board's decision to ignore known maintenance issues constituted willful negligence. This meant the HOA, and specifically the board members who voted for the delay, could be personally liable for a portion of the damages. Gerald was beside himself. "This could ruin me," he said during an emergency board meeting. "My retirement savings, my reputation." I'll admit, part of me enjoyed seeing him squirm. But I'd learned something about being the bigger person through all this, so I stepped in to help. Over the past year, I'd built up quite a network through those certification programs and industry conferences. I knew a mediator who specialized in HOA disputes. "Mr. Wilson," I said, "I think I know someone who can help us resolve this without going to court. But you'll need to trust my judgment completely." The look he gave me was priceless, a mix of hope and embarrassment. "I think I've learned that lesson, Tom. Whatever you think is best." The mediation process took 3 months. I provided detailed documentation showing how quickly we'd responded once the crisis hit, the comprehensive repairs we'd made, and the new maintenance protocols we'd put in place. The mediator was particularly impressed by the 5-year maintenance plan and the board's commitment to professional property management. In the end, we settled with the homeowners for a reasonable sum, about $75,000 total, split between insurance and the HOA's reserves. More importantly, we avoided a lengthy court battle that could have cost much more and potentially bankrupted some board members. After the settlement was finalized, Gerald called a special board meeting. I expected him to announce his resignation. He'd been hinting at stepping down for months. Instead, he proposed something that left everyone speechless. I moved to create a new position, he announced. Executive Director of Property Operations. This role would have full autonomy over all maintenance and property management decisions, with direct oversight of vendor contracts and a dedicated budget. The position would report directly to the board, but would have authority to make emergency decisions without board approval up to $250,000. One of the newer board members asked, "And who would fill this position?" Gerald smiled. "I think we all know there's only one person qualified. Tom has proven not just his expertise in property management, but his ability to handle crises and protect our community's interests. I'm proposing a 5-year contract with a starting salary of $110,000, plus performance bonuses and full benefits." The vote was unanimous. Even better, the resolution included a clause requiring any future boards to maintain this position and its authority. They couldn't pull what Gerald had tried with my original job. Speaking of Gerald, he did end up resigning as chairman last month, but not before implementing several other changes that honestly improved how our community runs. He rewrote the board's bylaws to require at least 2 members with relevant professional experience, engineering, construction, or property management. He also established a resident advisory committee to provide input on major community decisions. At his final board meeting, Gerald gave a speech that I have to admit got to me a little. "When I moved here 3 years ago, I thought I knew everything about management because I'd run a successful business. I thought cutting costs was always the right answer. Thanks to Tom Johnson, I learned that true leadership isn't about making the cheapest decision, it's about making the right decision." His professionalism, even when faced with my, let's call it misguided cost-cutting, showed me what real management looks like. Pine Grove Estates is a better community because of him, and I'm a better person for having learned these lessons. The new board chairman is that civil engineer I mentioned before, Sarah Chen. She's brilliant and practical, and we work together incredibly well. Last week, she approved my proposal for a comprehensive infrastructure upgrade plan that will keep our community in top shape for the next decade. Remember that property management company that tried to hire me away? They recently reached out again, this time asking if I would consult with their other communities about implementing maintenance programs similar to what we've developed at Pine Grove Estates. The board not only approved my taking on this side work, but insisted that any consulting fees be split between me and the HOA's reserve fund. It's a win-win that will bring in extra income for everyone. As for my personal life, my daughter finished her MBA and actually got involved in property management herself. She says watching how I handled this situation taught her more about business than any case study. She's now managing a luxury apartment complex in the city and doing amazingly well. Gerald's wife Linda and I have become good friends, surprisingly enough. She still takes jabs at him about the whole incident, but there's no real heat in it anymore. Last month, they hosted a retirement party for him at their house, and Linda insisted on making a toast. "To my husband, who finally learned that the most expensive mistake you can make is undervaluing good people. And to Tom, who taught him that lesson with more grace than most of us would have shown." The really funny part? Gerald now teaches a course at the community college about HOA management. He uses our water damage incident as a case study in what not to do, and he always invites me to speak to his classes about the importance of preventive maintenance and professional property management. Last week, during his final class of the semester, one of his students asked him what the biggest lesson was from his time as HOA chairman. "That's easy," he said. "Success in property management isn't about cutting costs. It's about investing in the right people and trusting their expertise." I learned that lesson the hard way, but thanks to the professionalism of our property manager, What could have been a complete disaster turned into an opportunity for positive change. I couldn't have said it better myself. These days, Pine Grove Estates is running better than ever. Our property values are up, our maintenance costs are actually down, thanks to proper preventive care, and we've become a model for other HOAs in the region. We regularly host visits from other community managers who want to learn about our maintenance programs and management structure. Every now and then, I drive past those houses that had the water damage, and you'd never know there had been any issues. The repairs were done right, the preventive measures we put in place are working perfectly, and the whole incident feels like ancient history. Well, almost ancient history. Gerald's latest hobby is writing a book about HOA management, and he keeps sending me chapters to review. The working title? The High Cost of Cutting Corners, a former HOA chairman's guide to what not to do. I have to admit it's pretty good. And if helping other communities avoid the same mistakes we made is part of my legacy here at Pine Grove Estates, I'm more than okay with that. After all, sometimes the best revenge isn't just proving someone wrong, it's helping them become right.